and said, offhand: "I am looking for you. Things are serious. You must answer me frankly. Since you have been at the castle, have you ever seen a man there, besides the 2 German servants whom I sent in?" "No." "Think carefully. I am not referring to a casual visitor. I mean a man who hides himself, a man whose presence you might have discovered or, less than that, whose presence you might have suspected from some clue or even by some intuition." "No. Have you?" "Yes, some one is hiding there, some one is prowling about. Where? And who is it? And what is his object? I don't know. But I shall know. I already have a suspicion. Do you, on your side, keep your eyes open and watch. And, above all, not a word to Mrs. Kesselbach. It is no use alarming her." He went away. Pierre Leduc, taken aback and upset, went back to the castle. On his way, he saw a piece of blue paper on the edge of the lawn. He picked it up. It was a telegram, not crumpled, like a piece of paper that had been thrown away, but carefully folded, obviously lost. It was addressed to Beauny, the name by which Lupin was known at Bruggen, and it contained these words: "We know the whole truth. Revelations impossible by letter. Will take train to night. Meet me 8 o'clock to morrow morning, Bruggen station." "Excellent!" said Lupin, who was watching Pierre Leduc's movements from a neighboring coppice. "Excellent! In 2 minutes from now, the young idiot will have shown Dolores the telegram and told her all my fears. They will talk about it all day. And the other one will hear, the other one will know, because he knows everything, because he lives in Dolores's own shadow and because Dolores is like a fascinated prey in his hands. And to night. ..." He walked away, humming to himself: "To night we shall dance. Such a waltz, my boys, the waltz of blood, to the tune of the little nickel-plated dagger. We shall have some fun at last." He reached the chalet, called to Octave, went to his room, flung himself on his bed and said to the chauffeur: "Sit down in that chair, Octave, and keep awake. Your master is going to take 40 winks. Watch over him, you faithful servant." He had a good sleep. "Like Napoleon on the morning of Austerlitz," he said, when he woke up. It was dinner time. He made a hearty meal and then, while he smoked a cigarette, inspected his weapons and renewed the charges of his 2 revolvers. "Keep your powder dry and your sword sharpened, as my chum the Kaiser says. Octave?" Octave appeared. "Go and have your dinner at the castle, with the servants. Tell them you are going to Paris to night, in the motor." "With you, governor?" "No, alone. And, as soon as dinner is over, make a start, ostensibly." "But I am not to go to Paris?" "No, remain outside the park, half a mile down the road, until I come. You will have a long wait." He smoked another cigarette, went for a stroll, passed in front of the castle, saw a light in Dolores's rooms, and then returned to the chalet. There he took up a book. It was the Lives of Illustrious Men. "There is one missing, the most illustrious of all. But the future will put that right. And I shall have my Plutarch some day or other." He read the Life of Cæsar and jotted down a few reflections in the margin. At 11:30 he went to his bedroom. Through the open window he gazed into the immense, cool night, all astir with indistinct sounds. Memories rose to his lips, memories of fond phrases which he had read or uttered; and he repeatedly whispered Dolores's name, with the fervor of a stripling who hardly dares confide to the silence the name of his beloved. He left the window half open, pushed aside a table that blocked the way, and put his revolvers under his pillow. Then, peacefully, without evincing the least excitement, he got into bed, fully dressed as he was, and blew out the candle. And his fear began. It was immediate. No sooner did he feel the darkness around him than his fear began. "Damn it all!" he cried. He jumped out of bed, took his weapons and threw them into the passage. My hands alone! Nothing comes up to the grip of my hands. He went to bed again. Darkness and silence once more. And once more his fear. The village clock struck 12. Lupin thought of the foul monster who, outside, at 100 yards, at 50 yards, from where he lay, was trying the sharp point of his dagger. "Let him come? Let him come?" whispered Lupin, shuddering. "Then the ghosts will vanish." 1 o'clock in the village. And minutes passed, endless minutes, minutes of fever and anguish. Beads of perspiration stood at the roots of his hair and trickled down his forehead; and he felt as though his whole frame were bathed in the sweat of blood. 2 o'clock. And now, somewhere, quite close, A hardly perceptible sound stirred, a sound of leaves moving, but different from the sound of leaves moving in the night breeze. As Lupin had foreseen, he was at once pervaded by an immense calm. All his adventurous being quivered with delight. The struggle was at hand, at last! Another sound grated under the window, more plainly this time, but still so faint that it needed Lupin's trained ear to distinguish it. Minutes, terrifying minutes. The darkness was impenetrable. No light of star or moon relieved it. And suddenly, without hearing anything, he knew that the man was in the room. And the man walked toward the bed. He walked as a ghost walks, without displacing the air of the room, without shaking the objects which he touched. But with all his instinct, with all his nervous force, Lupin saw the movements of the enemy and guessed the very sequence of his ideas. He himself did not budge, but remained propped against the wall, almost on his knees, ready to spring. He felt that the figure was touching, feeling the bedclothes, to find the spot at which it must strike. Lupin heard its breath. He even thought that he heard the beating of its heart. And he noticed with pride that his own heart beat no louder than before, whereas the heart of the other... Oh, yes, he could hear it now, that disordered, mad heart, knocking, like a clapper of a bell, against the cavity of the chest. The hand of the other rose. A second. 2 seconds. Was he hesitating? Was he once more going to spare his adversary? And Lupin, in the great silence, said: "But strike! Why don't you strike?" A yell of rage. The arm fell as though moved by a spring. Then came a moan. Lupin had caught the arm in mid air at the level of the wrist; and, leaping out of bed, tremendous, irresistible, he clutched the man by the throat and threw him. That was all. There was no struggle. There was no possibility even of a struggle. The man lay on the floor, nailed, pinned by 2 steel rivets which were Lupin's hands. And there was not a man in the world strong enough to release himself from that grip. And not a word. Lupin uttered none of those phrases in which his mocking humour usually delighted. He had no inclination to speak. The moment was too solemn. He felt no vain glee, no victorious exultation. In reality, he had but one longing: to know who was there. Louis de Malreich, the man sentenced to death? Or another? Which was it? At the risk of strangling the man, he squeezed the throat a little more, and a little more, and a little more still. And he felt that all the enemy's strength, all the strength that remained to him, was leaving him. The muscles of the arm relaxed and became lifeless. The hand opened and dropped the dagger. Then, free to move as he pleased, with his adversary's life hanging in the terrible clutch of his fingers, he took his pocket lantern with one hand, laid his finger on the spring, without pressing, and brought it close to the man's face. He had only to press the spring to wish to know, and he would know. For a second, he enjoyed his power. A flood of emotion upheaved him. The vision of his triumph dazzled him. Once again, superbly, heroically, he was the master. He switched on the light. The face of the monster came into view. Lupin gave a shriek of terror. Dolores Kesselbach. Chapter 15.